All right, so I see more people joined. Again, hi all, this is Control Access to Resources webinar. We provide it on monthly basis, and today let's look at our agenda. Let's look at our plan. So first of all, we'll just talk about the definition of the resource. Not everyone probably have a clear understanding what the resource is. And then we'll talk in general about providing some rights to the resource. Then we want to look specifically at the topic of general and special rights to resource. We won't cover all rights, all general rights and all special rights, but at least we need to understand what's the difference between the general rights and special rights. And then we'll talk about most common access right templates. This is the key to your success when you do the access right distribution. If you have the standard most useful access right templates created, then everything else becomes very simple. Plus, we will talk about shared resources. What is the definition of shared resource, why you need to create it, and when you need to create it, and how to benefit from it. So today, the webinar will be mostly theoretical, even so we still find the time to look at the platform interface and see how the access rights distribution work on the real platform interface. Still, that webinar is mostly theoretical. And here is the first slide I want to share with you. And we'll start from resource definition. This is probably my own definition, not that much related to the documentation, so you probably won't find that definition in the documentation, but here is how the resource can be explained. Resource is a storage for reports, geofences, drivers, trailers, passengers, jobs, and notifications that may belong to one individual company. Company here means account, or that resource can be shared between multiple users from different companies. Again, different companies means different accounts. So usually imagine a company who needs to work with geofences. If the company is working with geofences, let's say some parking lots, some garage, some store and school, then those geofences should be available only to the users of that specific company. That's why that specific company should have its own storage for those geofences, right? And that's why we want to cover a couple of rules here. Rule number one, whenever you need to add new client, you create one new account. Account here is the same thing as resource, so equal resource, with at least one new user for this company, okay? So that this company has an ability to create their own geofences, their own drivers, their own trailers, passengers, jobs, notifications, reports also, and they will not be available for any other company that you create in the future. Now, rule number two is that user who becomes a creator of that resource, that main user that you create along with the resource, that user automatically has full rights to this resource. One exception, you can change it manually. You can go to the user and look at his rights to resource and then change the full rights to some other template. But automatically he has full rights to his own resource, to his own reports, geofences, drivers, trailers. And rule number three, any new resource has no content. By content, we mean what? We mean, again, reports, geofences, drivers, etc. So by default, it will never has any content. That means what? That means that you would need to create that content. You would need to create those drivers, or your end users will do it themselves, okay? So pretty often I got the question, can I duplicate the account? Can I copy the account? No, you can't copy the account itself, but you can copy the resource content. So you can copy reports, drivers, and so on from one resource to other resources. How would you do it? Import export to WLP tool will help you. And that's covered in other webinar we already had in February. So please feel free to refer to the recorded webinars on YouTube playlist, Velan periodic webinars, okay? I'd like to mention on this slide is that here you see the screenshot from the Velan platform interface, and each item that belongs to the resource is listed on that screenshot. It's a tab on your top menu. So reports, geofences, drivers, trailers, passengers, jobs, and notifications. Okay, so maybe it will help you to memorize what the resource is. I'm not talking about the difference of resource and account here, but I want to highlight that it's pretty much the same, and it's always, absolutely always named the same, it has the same name, named the same way. Later on, you will understand the difference. We'll cover that part. When you need to create a resource and when we need to create an account, you'll see the difference. So let's go to the next slide. And I also want to encourage your questions. Don't forget, you can ask the questions. And today my colleague Anthony Franklin will be assisting with those questions. If he has time to do it during the session, then you'll get the answer during the session. If not, then I'll do my best to answer your questions after this webinar. So as a quick reminder, I want to specify how you can give the rights to the resource. Who owns these rights? The only object, I would call it object, the only object that owns the rights to any items in our system is the user. User who has some rights to what? To other users, to units, to unit groups, and specifically users are the ones who have rights to the resources. So today we'll focus on the resources. How we give users the right to the resources? We can do it in two ways. There are little screenshots on the bottom. The first screenshot is from Velan Hosting Monitoring interface. Here, I open the Users tab, I see my users, and I can open the user properties to give the user right to the resource. On the right screenshot, you see the CMS interface, admin interface. Most of the users do not have access to it. Only admin users have access to that interface, right? But you can also open the Users tab. It's just for management convenience, right? We give managers availability to give users the rights from the CMS interface. So we have the Users tab. You open the user property by using their shortcut Control-click. Oh, I'm sorry, here, double click on the username. Double click on the username to open user properties. That's how you open this dialog. And this is how this user properties dialog looks. You open your Access tab, then you see the list of the resources. You may not see this list of the resources by default. You see on the top, I have resources menu. So if you don't see resources, then, you know, by default you see units, you click on it and you switch it to resources. Then you see the resource list, and that's how you highlight certain resources and provide some rights to them. Using access right templates, we'll talk about them later, or looking at these checkboxes. Each right is a separate checkbox. Another way to provide the rights to the resources is to open one specific resource property and provide the rights to this resource to multiple users. So you can select specific users, users 1, 2, and 3, and give them the right, Or you can even select all users and tell everyone should have access to that resource. Usually you do it when you deal with the shared resources that, again, we'll talk later about them. But the main idea is that you do the access rights distribution this way only when you need to give multiple users the rights at the same time. And you need to do it only with one resource. You can do it in CMS only. This is why these two little screenshots show you the interface of CMS. The main idea here was to show you that you would double click on their resource or on the account. Again, here is the same thing. Either resource or account, depends on what you created. And you would open their resource property or account property. And sorry, there is a little mistake on this screenshot. It's not control click, but double click. So you double click and you open account properties. Now, this is how your account properties will look like, or resource properties will look like. So on the left screenshot, resource, on the right account, pretty much the same, just resource has less tabs. But in both cases, you should open access tab. Again, on both screenshots, you see access tab is opened and you see multiple users. Here you would select those users and assign them some access rights to this resource. All right, so here again on the slide, CMS only. So when you need to give rights to multiple users to see certain reports or geofences of a resource, you do it from CMS, because you can't access the resource properties from monitoring interface at all. Now, let's start with topic one. Topic one is about the difference between standard rights and special rights. So just one step backwards. So you see, whenever we open access tab, we see two columns, item ACL and resource ACL. Doesn't matter how we open the access rights dialog, from user or from resource, we always see item ACL and resource ACL. Item ACL means standard rights. Okay, ACL stands for access control list, so basically just list of rights. And the standard rights do not change if you decide to provide some rights to the unit or unit group or user or resource, doesn't matter. This column will stay unchanged. The meaning of each right will change, but the list of the rights will not. This is why we call them standard. And yes, the meaning is changing. And in this case, any rights that you see on the first column have no value. They are not important unless you give the user the rights to the CMS. So if the user doesn't have the rights to the CMS, then it's practically does not matter if you provide these rights or not, okay? Okay, so on the right side of the screen, you see special rights. And they are relevant to all users who have access to the monitoring to the monitoring interface. So if the user can log in to the main interface of the platform where you see the map, then it's worth thinking about limiting his rights to the geofences, jobs, reports, drivers. And here on the bottom of that screenshot, again, you see the list of the content of the resource. So reports, geofences, drivers, trailers, passengers, jobs, notifications. All of these items are listed on this right column. Okay, we won't going to cover absolutely each right from the right column. But what is very important is to understand that you always have a pair of right. Ability to view one of these items and ability to create, edit, and delete one of these items. Okay? So this way, you can easily memorize those rights. The first column, very rarely used, like you shouldn't worry about it unless you want to restrict certain admin users' rights who have access to CMS and who should, for example, see all the accounts but not be able to delete those accounts. But this is not something that we will detailedly cover today. Okay. So, again, I decided to emphasize how important the resource definition is, right? To remember what the content of this resource is. If you remember that, then this special rights column will be easy to manage, will be easier to manage. Now, very briefly, I'd like to cover the most common access right templates. The default one is no access, right? And in this case, practically whenever you need to disable someone's rights to see and edit any content of the resource, then you give no access right to this user. Then another default one is full access. Remember that the creator of the account, creator of the resource automatically gets full access that you can later restrict. And of course, for any new user that you create, you can give the full access to him manually, right? So it's pretty useful access rights template, unless you are thinking about restricting the access rights. And here comes the dispatcher access right template. It's not a default one, so you would need to create such access right template yourself, or you can ask your account manager or anyone from support to help you to create some similar access right template. It can be also, provided to you in WLP format file. So what is special about it? It's very simple one. It's easy to create it, because the only difference between full access and dispatcher view only access is that dispatcher has view only rights. So what I did here, I uncheck any right which starts with the word create. And I didn't make any changes on the first column because none of my users have access rights to CMS by default. So again, I didn't care about the first column. Okay. Let me see. Here comes the concept of shared resources. And once we cover it, then we'll talk about another access right template that will be helpful to you. So the shared resource should be created when your customers need pretty much the same report templates, pretty much the same geofences, and pretty much the same notifications. Now, reports are pretty clear. So a lot of reports are very standard, like trips and parking report, idling report. And why do you need to create a separate reports or copy those reports to each account individually? It's much easier to create a separate resource, copy reports to this resource, and then share it between all users or certain particular users who need the same type of reports. Maybe some other group of users who needs to have a separate shared resource with more advanced reports. In this case, you share it with user 1, 2, and 3 only. But if all of your customers need pretty much the same report, then you just select all users and you give them access. With geofences, the use case for shared geofences would be the geofences of United States or the geofences of Canadian territories. When you need, for example, to see what is the mileage drawn in each geofence area in each state. So, for example, how many miles was drove in Utah, and how many miles did this driver drove in Massachusetts. So when you need that type of report, you need to have access to these geofences, one for Massachusetts, another one for Utah, another one for Colorado, and for each state of US. So in this case, you don't want to copy those geofences to each account. That would create some, like unnecessary duplicates of geofences, which are pretty heavy. They have thousands of dots. In this case, you just add them to the shared resource and then give everyone a limited access to these geofences along with the report. Now you may ask me, why would you need to have a standard notification? The most common answer would be, why don't you create the most common geofences and then let everyone be able to copy them. So when your clients are creating the notifications, they can do it themselves without asking you thousands of questions. Or even when you create those notifications for your customers, let's say you decide you will do it yourself, still, when you do it by copying those standard notifications that you add to their shared resource. Okay, so that's the benefit of having a shared resource. Your customers should be able to view those shared reports, geofences, and notifications. With the reports, they also need to be able to query report, generate, execute it, right? And if they have an ability to create those reports, geofences, and notifications in their own resource, which they usually have full rights to their own resource automatically, then they can always copy any report or any notification or even any geofence and have it and edit it because they will have another copy that will belong to them only. I already talked which access rights those users should have, but let me show you this access right template. There are two views. One is an end customer view. So I open the user properties, and another view is resource view. Okay, so I open the resource properties. In both cases, you see that I'm giving the right to query report that are shared between everyone. And I also give the right to view geofences, view report templates. And you don't see it on the first screenshot, but I definitely give the right to view notifications. So on the left screenshot, I also gave that right. On the right screenshot, however, you see that I gave the right to view geofences, view notifications, and then somewhere if we scroll down, you'll see that I also gave the right view report template. On the left side, you see that I gave the right view item and its basic properties. This right is the default one. Like if you don't give that right, you are not able to give any others at all. If we were able to scroll down, you would also see that I gave the right query report or messages. So it's the same template, it's just two other views from the top and from the bottom. Very basic rights and very basic access right template. Okay. Then how you would benefit from it. Usually you would open resource properties, highlight that template, highlight all users and then select that template. So then how would you deal with any new account that you create? So any new account will have the main user, and that main user should automatically get access to that shared resource. Here is the plan on how you would do it. First step is not mentioned here, but on the right side of this slide, what we see, we have a template user who has access to shared resource. He doesn't have access to anything else, but he has access to that shared resource with geofences, notifications, and reports. And he has exactly this limited access so you assign him that shared resource access right template. So if you create such template user, then you can benefit from it. How you create it? This is a hierarchy structure. So we see top user, top account, and let's say you have intermediate level, admin user and admin account. This admin user and admin account is responsible for creating all other end customers. He also created the template user. So this admin user should be responsible for creating template user. Then whenever you need to create a new customer, you would do it in 2 steps that are described on the left side of the screenshot. First, you create end user, we called it end user 1, by copying a template user, okay? Second step, you go to the accounts tab and you create a new account with this end user 1. So you would select existing user and you would say the creator of that account should be end user 1. This way, end user 1, who is the copy of the template user, will automatically get the access rights to the shared resource and the same access rights as template user has. Okay, I also see we have a question from John. He asks, how many levels can we have in the hierarchy? Are there any restrictions in the level naming convention? John and everyone, you can have as many levels of the hierarchy as you wanted to have, okay? So there is no restriction on the number of the levels of accounts. However, you only should create as many levels as you need. Do not create those levels that you don't need, okay? So just a general recommendation, whenever you're thinking about how to use the resources that we give you, there, for example, ability to create thousands of geofences and copy them to each resource, even so you can do it, you shouldn't do it this way. You should use the resources carefully. You should put those geofences in the shared resource and let everyone see those geofences and use them and benefit from them. This goes the same way with the levels of the hierarchy. Yes, you can create as many as you want, but don't create the one that you don't need, okay? As for the restrictions in the level naming convention, John, we need more clarification on it because it's not very clear. What do you mean by level naming convention? So please follow up in and ask a separate question, or we can discuss it later via email, okay? So this is practically all I want to share with you today. I see that unfortunately we were not able to look at Unfortunately, today we were not able to look at their platform interface, okay? So it was mostly theoretical webinar. I do my best to make that webinar a little bit shorter when we post it on the YouTube and add a little bit more information from the main interface of VLAN hosting. So please watch that webinar once it gets posted on the YouTube, specifically the last part of that webinar, okay? Because it will include additional information. Thank you for your attention and have a good day. We'll see you in a month and feel free to ask any questions that you probably have left. I'll follow up with you. Thank you.